Hi, my name is Tiffany Grady, and I'm the Squam Lake project biologist with Loon Preservation Committee. Thank you so much for volunteering for Chick Watch and helping to protect Squam's loons. Chick Watch is a partnership between the Squam Lake Association and the Loon Preservation Committee. The goals of Chick Watch are to provide protection for our loon families and to improve chick survival on Squam Lake. As I'm sure many of you know, Squam's loons have struggled in recent years, and Chick Watch is a wonderful way that we can all work together to help improve the survival of chicks on Squam. Another one of our goals is educating lake users about the needs of the loons and helping lake users understand how to boat safely around loons and how we can all work together to help loons thrive on Squam. And the final goal is to collect data on both human disturbances as well as loon intrusions on Squam's families of loons. These are both factors that have impacted the survival of loon chicks on Squam, and by gathering data, you will help us to better understand what is impacting the loons on Squam Lake. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview now of what you do on Loon Chick Watch, and we'll talk in more detail later about how you carry out the protocol for Loon Chick Watch on Squam. So we ask people to go out on the lake in 1 to 2 hour shifts on the busy summer weekends, as well as on major holidays such as 4th of July. We ask you to slowly and carefully approach a loon family and position your boat a respectful distance away from the loons. At that point, you will shadow the loons as they move around their territory and protect the loons from approaching boats. You can also educate the boaters about the needs of the loons and help them understand how they can boat more safely around loons and how we can all work together to protect them. So why is Chick Watch important? As I mentioned, Squam's loons have faced many challenges in recent years, and loon chick survival has been very poor. For many of the recent years, we have had only a single surviving loon chick on Squam Lake. And this is something that we certainly need to improve to help our loon population. Many of the stresses that can affect loons and loon chicks are anthropogenic. In other words, they're caused by humans. And the ones that affect loon chicks in particular are boat collisions and disturbance from the close approach of boaters. And we'll talk about those things in more detail. And Chick Watch, of course, is also important to educate lake users about the needs of the loons. One of the guiding philosophies of Loon Preservation Committee is that loons and people can thrive together on the lakes as long as we are willing to share the lakes with the loons and treat them with a little bit of respect. And educating the lake users about how they can share the lake with loons will certainly help improve the fortunes of Squam's loons and the survival of loon chicks on Squam Lake. It's in those lakes that we're able to create a culture of respect that loons can thrive. And that is certainly something that we want to have happen on Squam. So let's talk about these factors that affect chick survival. And boat collisions are a major cause of loon chick mortality. They account for about 22% of the loon chicks' carcasses that we are able to recover and are the second leading known cause of death for loon chicks. So why does this happen? So for one thing, chicks are hard to see on the water. They're small, they're dark colored, and they can be very difficult to see with a speeding oncoming boat. And of course, loon chicks are not able to dive as well as the adult loons. Adult loons, of course, are very famous for their diving ability, but loon chicks are just learning, and so they are certainly not able to dive as well as the adults and get out of the way of an oncoming boat. Another factor that makes loon chicks difficult to see is that the adults may not be present with the chicks all the time. In order to feed a loon chick, an adult loon needs to be diving and bringing up a minnow and then handing it to the chick. So what that means is that the loon chicks may be alone on the surface as the adults are diving, looking for fish to feed them. And if an adult is not with the chicks, it may make the chicks that much more difficult for a boater to spot. Loons will also cross coves or even cross between islands with a loon chick. Loons are territorial birds, and within those territories, which often encompass one of the larger coves or a grouping of islands, they may have favored areas where they like to raise the chicks. But of course, unfortunately, some of those favored areas for brooding their chicks may be on the opposite side of a boat lane or a busy cove, and they may have to cross those coves with the loon chicks. And of course, while they're doing that, that puts them in danger of being hit by an oncoming boat or a water skier or a jet ski. Also, loons and their chicks do not only spend time by the caution loon chick signs that Loon Preservation Committee puts out. I'm sure many of you have seen these orange signs that appear on the lake in the late summer saying caution loon chicks and letting people know that there are chicks in these areas. It has come to our attention that some people believe that the loons will only be around those chicks. This is not the case. We put these signs out around a loon territory that has a chick in it, but the loons may be anywhere within that territory with the chicks. We'll certainly put these signs in areas where the loons tend to spend more time with their chicks, but that doesn't mean that the loons and their chicks will only be by those signs. So, how do we help prevent these collisions? When you're out there doing the chick watch, if you see a boat that's speeding towards the loon family, we ask you to get the attention of that boater. Wave your arms, wave your paddle if you're in a kayak. Put yourself between where the loons are and that boat and get the attention of that oncoming boat to ask them to slow down. And once you've gotten the people to slow down, go out and talk to them and tell them to slow down in the areas marked with those orange chick signs. Because as we said, the loons can be anywhere in those territories, and that those signs are out there to alert boaters to the presence of the loons, and that boaters in general in areas marked with those chick signs should slow down, boat carefully, and keep their eyes open for the loons and their chicks. And also tell the boaters to be aware that the chicks may be apart from the adults, that they aren't only out there looking for the adult loons. They need to be careful as they're boating. Boat slowly and carefully and be aware that the chicks may be apart from the adults. And also remind them to not expect the loons to dive out of the way. As we mentioned, loon chicks are not able to dive as well as the adults, and even with the adults, we don't want to be driving at them at a high speed with an oncoming boat. So always ask them when they see a loon or a chick out there to slow down and give the loons a wide berth so that we are reducing the potential for a collision between the boat and those loons. So let's move on to talk about human disturbance from the close approach of boats as well as canoes and kayaks. This can severely stress the loons. And one of the things that we have found is that people in canoes and kayaks often believe that because these are quiet, non-motorized boats, it's okay for them to get close to the loons. And this is not the case at all. In many ways, canoes and kayaks can be more insidious to the loons than a speedboat because people are attempting to approach the loons too closely. This can reduce the ability of the loons to care for their chicks, and this results in reduced fitness and the potential death of these loon chicks. So how does this happen? If a boat, say for example a canoe or kayak, or any boat for that matter, is approaching the loons, the adult loons will spend the time watching the boats rather than feeding and caring for their chicks. As a result, the chicks don't get enough food. Rather than diving and bringing up fish for the chicks, the adults will stay on the surface, watching those boats and essentially worrying about what that boat is going to do. In addition, loon chicks that are stressed by the close approach of a boat may refuse to eat. And this can actually go on for hours. It has been demonstrated that the close approach of a boat that causes stress to a loon chick, several hours may pass before that chick will accept food from the parents again. Loons can also get pushed out of brooding areas by the close approach of the boaters. Brooding areas are these areas where the loons will stay with their chicks. These are areas that have good food, so they're prime feeding areas for loon chicks. And in addition, they're often areas that are protected from wind and waves, so they're a very protected part of the cove. If a boat is approaching closely, the loons will often swim away from these boats. This may push them out of these brooding areas, and it can push them, in many cases, out into the more open water, which of course then puts them in danger of a collision from a high-speed boat. So, talking points. Ask people to stay at least 150 feet away from the loons and the loon families. This is generally a safe distance in which the loons will be able to continue carrying out their normal behaviors, feeding their chicks, without too much stress. Now, of course, loons are different. Loons as individuals will have different responses to the approach of a boater. Some loons may be more sensitive than others. So, if the loon is showing stress at that distance, of course ask people to back away. But 150 feet, which of course is the no-wake distance, so boaters should be familiar with that distance, is generally a safe distance for the loons. And also ask people to be alert for signs of concern or stress on the part of the loons. In many cases, loons will give very subtle indications that they're stressed. It can be a little bit difficult. People need to know what they're looking for to pick up on these indicators. But we'll give you brochures that you can hand out to boaters that will show them the signs of stress on the part of the loons, and we'll also talk about those a little bit later in this presentation. So, of course, when you're interacting with other boaters, education is key. We want to teach people about the needs of the loons and educate them. It's an opportunity to help people better understand how they can live on the lake with loons in a way that is respectful. We ask you to please not be confrontational with anyone. We're not asking you to get into an argument with people or to be angry or to yell at people. Remember, of course, that you are representing the Squam Lakes Association and the Loon Preservation Committee, and of course we want to leave a good impression on people. So simply educate the people. If they are unwilling to listen to what you have to say, simply thank them and continue on with your chick watching. This is an educational opportunity, and this is not intended to be confrontational in any way. So let's talk a little bit about the protocol for Chick Watch. So as we said before, we ask people to go out in shifts of 1 to 2 hours and slowly and carefully approach the loon family and position your boat a respectful distance away from the loons. So once again, that 150-foot radius around the loons should be okay unless the loons indicate otherwise. Shadow the family as they move around the territory so that you're always staying in proximity to them, and you will be able to intervene if a boat is approaching them, but of course do not be too close in such a way that you would interfere with what the loons are doing or cause the loons any stress. We ask you as well to fill out a data log, and by giving us the data both on boater interactions as well as loon interactions, and I'll talk about that in just a second, that'll help us to understand the amount of disturbance that the loons are dealing with. And as you're shadowing the family and collecting this data, of course, we ask you to educate boaters about the needs of the loons and how we can all work together to protect them. And as you're doing that, of course, you're intervening in any situation that might be dangerous or stressful for the loons. This is an example of the volunteer log that you'll be filling out. So of course at the top, we ask you to give us the location, date, and time of the shift that you're doing. And of course, as you're doing it, put a tick for each type of boat that you see that's in close proximity to the loons while you're carrying out your chick watch. This is not even necessarily each one where you felt the need to have an intervention with the boater, but if a boat comes in the vicinity of the loons, even if they're not within that 150-foot radius or not in an area where you feel the need to intervene, just at least give us an indication that there has been a loon, or excuse me, a boat in the area of the loon. And then the lower part of that data form are cases where you are intervening. So give us the time, let us know what the type of boat is, let us know if you gave out some of the brochures that the Squam Lakes Association, when you sign up for Chick Watch, they'll ask you to come over, collect an outreach packet, and you'll have some behavior brochures and some lead brochures, as well as some non-lead tackle that you can give out. And then we ask you to write in some comments relating to loon behaviors, reactions, interactions with the boaters, whatever can help shed light on the nature of both the reaction of the loons or the reaction of the boaters to the information that you are supplying them. We'll also ask you to fill in any information if there was a loon intrusion while you were there. This is a situation where a loon may intrude on the territory of a family and essentially try to start a fight with that family. If you see that happening, please fill that in on the volunteer log as well. So of course, we want to make sure that Chick Watch is something that's beneficial and doesn't cause additional harm or stress to the loons. So of course, it is very important while you're doing Chick Watch that you do not cause any stress to the loons. As Judy Silverberg of New Hampshire Fish and Game once said, if you cause an animal to change its behavior, you have already impacted that animal. And that is certainly not something that we want to have happening during the Chick Watch. So when carrying Chick Watch, please be careful not to approach the loons too closely yourself. Always stay at a respectful distance. If you notice the loons displaying some of the signs of stress, or if you notice them slowly swimming away from you, they're letting you know that you've already been too close to them. So back away, let them resume their normal behavior, and just remember not to approach the loons more closely than that. We want to make sure that the loons are able to go about their normal behaviors while we're doing the Chick Watch. So, signs that you might be too close to the loons. If the loons begin to swim slowly or even just drift away from you, you've gotten too close. And the thing is with the loons is that they, as I mentioned before, they tend to be very subtle. So it may be a very slow drift, and in fact, you may not even notice it at first. And all of a sudden you notice that, oh my goodness, those loons are considerably farther away from me. It may not appear to you to be a purposeful drift or swim away, but that's something they will do. So be very mindful and watchful for that. If all of a sudden the loons are either clearly swimming and drifting away from you, or if you suddenly realize that, wow, those loons are suddenly farther away from me than they initially were, that's an indication that you are too close to those loons. Also, if you notice that the loons are looking at you and not resuming their normal behavior, that can certainly be a sign that they're concerned about you and have interrupted whatever it is that they were doing and are watching you to see what you're going to do next. In that case, of course, you also want to back away from the loons. If you see indications of stress, and we'll talk about what those are in just a second, but remember, loons will give very subtle indications of stress. Because the loons are so famous for their calls, a lot of people believe that if a loon is under stress, they'll be making all sorts of raucous calls, and sometimes they will vocalize. If they do, you certainly want to move away. But many of their indications of stress are much more subtle than that, and it's something you need to look carefully for. So we will give you a brochure very similar to this, and this is something that we can ask you to distribute to boaters while you're doing Chick Watch, but it's also something for your own reference. And I want you especially to notice that middle column there of concerned loons. These are all positions that loons will go into to indicate that they're concerned, they're nervous, they're feeling threatened. So if we look at the top picture under the concerned loons column, notice that little bump on the forehead of that loon. They've raised those feathers on the forehead, and this is a sign of stress. Normally, a loon's forehead is smooth. So if you look in the middle picture under the relaxed loon column, notice how smooth their forehead is. That's the position of a loon that's relaxed. In contrast with the bump on the picture of the loon under the concerned loon column. When those feathers on the forehead is raised, that loon is letting you know it's stressed. Of course, the loons can also stretch up their neck, as you see them doing in the middle picture under the concerned loon columns, or lower its head right over the water, as you see in the bottom there. Both the stretched up neck and the lowered head are all indications that the loon is nervous, it's feeling threatened, and you certainly want to back away. So as I said, loons can give subtle indications of stress. They're not all obvious, but we'll give you a copy of those brochure, and you can keep it both for your own reference as well as distribute it to boaters while you're doing Chick Watch. So Chick Watch is really designed to help the loons cope with human pressures, especially recreational pressures, while they're on the lake. We ask you to please not to interfere with any natural disturbance events. The focus here is on human impacts, and loons, of course, are wild animals, and we do not want to interfere with any natural circumstances. Of course, we have asked you to note any loon intrusions on the volunteer log, but we ask you to not interfere with those. This is loons doing what loons do. We want them to carry out those natural behaviors, and we want to understand better the rate of loon intrusions on the lake, but we ask you not to intervene. Intervention is unsuccessful in these situations. Loons are determined, so if you have an intruding loon, you will not be able to stop that intrusion, and at worst, a loon could get hurt. So we ask you not to interfere in that situation, simply to report it. We only ask you to intervene when there's a human factor going on, such as an oncoming speedboat or the close approach of boaters. We also ask you, please do not disclose the location of the loon families to others. This is very important. This is, of course, for the protection and the safety of the loons. We do not want to draw more attention to these loons and thus increase the rate of boats going into those areas and potentially disturbing the loons. So we are so grateful to you for volunteering for doing Chick Watch. It's a really important way to protect the loons, but we do ask you to not disclose the location. We're providing these locations because we know you want to help the loons, and we ask you to please use that information responsibly for the protection and the safety of the loons. And of course, we're not only concerned about the safety of the loons, we're concerned about your safety as well. So please, of course, follow all the normal rules of the water as established by Marine Patrol. And of course, weather is a very important factor. Please do not go out and do Chick Watch if you're signed up for a shift and the weather is looking threatening. At the first sign of thunder or lightning, if you're already out doing Chick Watch, please leave the water. If it's already storming when you're supposed to do your shift, please do not go out. If you feel at all uncomfortable about the weather or any other safety issue, please do not go out for Chick Watch. We are, of course, very concerned about your safety as well. So thank you so much for helping to protect Squam's loons by volunteering for Chick Watch, and happy chick watching. They're spending an hour or two with the loon family is an amazing experience. It's an amazing thing to have the opportunity to do. Enjoy it and know that you are doing something very, very important to help Squam's loons. And those of us at Loon Preservation Committee and the Squam Lakes Association, thank you so much for volunteering. And we would also like to thank Alex Constan for the use of his photo in this presentation. Thank you very much and happy chick watching.